All right. So for our next segment this week, we're going to be looking at an article that we found on medium.com. It was written by Dan Foster in July 17th of this year. And the headline is Florida teen takes school to court for religious persecution, Bible reading, bullies, and a First Amendment showdown. So what happened here is that there's the student, Nicholas Ortiz, and his parents, Rafael and Lourdes Ortiz. They've filed a lawsuit against the Mater Academy, which is a public charter school in Hialeah Gardens in Florida, which is just north of Miami. And it claimed that the school allowed Nicholas to be bullied and harassed because of his Christian faith, and that a teacher even had also actively participated in the harassment. And there were these four main points of the suit, and I'll just do a quick summary here. So the first one, of course, we said was that there was a teacher involved, and so there was a claim that the teacher was calling them ignorant for believing in the Bible, specifically mentioning the Bible there. The complaint also alleged that the teacher was inciting other students to bully and pick on Nicholas for reading the Bible at school. The second point was that students had physically and verbally bullied Nicholas on multiple occasions in relation to his Christianity. He was reading the Bible at school and carrying it around with them and things like that, and that the school did little or nothing to investigate or to follow up on that. The third claim was that the student claims that Nicholas had brought it. Oh, other students had claimed that Nicholas had brought a knife to school and that he had made violent threats against the school and against other individual students. The lawsuit does point out that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security visited their home and found that the accusations were unfounded. And the last point was that the school didn't punish Nicholas's accused bullies, and in fact punished Nicholas as a result of a physical confrontation where Nicholas struck out against another student in response to being bullied. But they also said that he was causing a, quote, disruption of the learning environment. And so that's kind of the gist of the lawsuit that's happening here. I can say for sure that as a teacher and as a parent of teenagers, cases of bullying in school are very much a concern for me. And so I could go on this all night, but before I do, I'm going to pass it to Malley. Malley, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I think I just watched this movie. It was called God's Not Dead. Have you guys seen this? It's so a brave Christian student goes to a public university where he is challenged by his monstrous atheist, evil professor guy to admit that God is dead before he's able to, get a passing grade in the class. And of course, redemption in the end as the atheist lies dying, accepting Jesus into his heart. And guys, this doesn't happen. I really do not believe this. Now, if it did happen the way they said it happens, well, we need to side with the Christian on it. Because that's unacceptable. We can't bully anybody for any beliefs. That, preventing that protects everyone. There's a point toward the end of the article, as a matter of fact, where they said, he shouldn't sue. He should expect persecution. And that's fine if you're a Christian, but this is for everybody. So, if this really did happen, you do want to sue. I just don't believe it. This is Florida, 68% Christian, Ron DeSantis territory. They just passed HB 999 in Florida, which kind of attacks science in the classroom. So, the idea that the majority person in this scenario, part of the 68%, is being persecuted by a minority in Florida at this moment, something doesn't really smell right, Now, there was a kid in my church when I was a teenager and fundamentalist AF. And this kid was really obsessed with being persecuted because, if you're not being persecuted, you're doing something wrong. That's what the Bible says anyway. So he would go out of his way to go to malls and, talk to girls whose skirts were too short and, tell them they were going to hell and stuff just so he could get screamed at and feel like he was doing something right. I mean, this was the MO for this kid and for a lot of people. I think that's it. It strikes me as odd that he would just be sitting reading a very popular book in a school and that's all there is to it. There's another side to this story. And something tells me he was preaching, proselytizing, being aggressive. We'll have to wait and see if I'm wrong. You know, come at me, bro. I apologize and I'm on your side. Otherwise, yeah, right. What do you think, Chris?
I got to agree with you. There's multiple sides to the story. I mean, if it's all true, we're really known for our litigious nature in America. And if you were wronged, you have the right to go after whoever wronged you with your evidence and try to get satisfaction out of that. But I'm with you in the I think I saw this movie camp. So what screams to me a little bit is this seems almost like maybe there was one incident, maybe there were two minor incidents. I mean, kids bully kids. It's a thing that happens in school, but it seems like this was blown out of proportion by the parents who may have seen this movie and are trying to get some clout for that. The other part of me sort of wants to lean back on my own experience with bullying, because back in the day, elementary school, I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household. I was that kid that was reading the Bible at school. I was that kid that responded to every question with some sort of Bible verse or something like that, and didn't really have the social development necessary to interact with children my own age appropriately, because all of that interaction was done at church. So I think you're absolutely right. There's something going on, because there's another side to this story, because I know from my own experience when I was on the receiving end of that bullying, looking back on it, I can't exactly say it wasn't justified with the way that I was behaving and the things that I was saying. And so that's basically all I have to say about that. It's just kind of, it's kind of unbelievable. What do you think, Scott?
I think you're right. I mean, there are some aspects of the story that I really had a hard time with, like the science teacher telling him he was wrong for being a Christian. Now, I can't see a science teacher telling a kid that. I just can't see it. I could see a science teacher for telling him evolution is correct. So that would be something I could see happening, but I just can't see a science teacher telling any student that he was wrong for believing in his religious faith, especially at a public school. Although this is a charter school, so you're in that weird private public area, but still, even so, it's kind of just something that you shouldn't do. I do. So some of the parts of the story I really have a problem with. And then one of the things that the author of the story brought up with that I thought was really important is, and Malley kind of touched on it, was the persecution complex. Oh, I mentioned Malley's name. He disappeared. I'm very powerful today.
Don't cross Kelley. You will suffer the consequences.
So, but aren't Christians supposed to be persecuted? That's all part of the identity of being a Christian. So if you are being persecuted, why are you complaining about it? What is the problem you're having with it? Shouldn't you want to be persecuted? I don't get why he's bringing a lawsuit because something that is supposed to happen to him is happening. So I want to hear a lot more from Scott, though, because Scott is our resident teacher here. So Scott, what do you have to say?
Well, before I get into that, I did find along the lines of, boy, this is kind of a fishy sounding story. Is he being, like Chris was saying, is he being aggressive and preaching? I did find, I looked up the same article on the christianpost.com, and I always like to scroll down to the comments to see what people are saying. And so here was a comment that I saw there. I'll just quick summarize it. This was from somebody who claimed to be a student at that school. Now, don't forget, this is just a public comment on a news post. And so, let's take this with a grain of salt here. But the student claimed to know Nicholas Ortiz and said that he had made racist, sexist, and anti-LGBTQ comments, and he had made death threats against other students. He also said that Nicholas was very aggressive in his Bible reading and preaching in school. So it was kind of what Chris was saying about, is he kind of drawing this on himself? Having said that, though, I think it's very easy for us to start looking for holes in this persecution story, and we could even say that they were kind of inviting that kind of critique. But I think we really need to underline here, if we have a strong takeaway from this story, and that is bullying is not acceptable. I think that's going to overshadow everything that we say about whether we think he was telling the truth or whether not, or is probably a mixture of all of these, right? We've only heard one side of the story. The school didn't really have much to say. By the way, if a teacher had said something like that to a student, they would have no problem getting volunteers from that class to say, yes, he said that, or no, they didn't say that. But going back to the bullying, though, I mean, the school really has two responsibilities here. One is to keep the students safe, right? And that's baseline. Students have to feel safe when they go to school. Otherwise, it's going to affect their learning, their ability to learn. But more than that, the second side of that is that they have to help the students to feel safe. So even students that are safe, if they don't feel safe, that will still affect them. And so what I would have liked to have seen, and I don't know that this didn't happen, but I would expect that the story would have mentioned it, is that if the school had any kind of transparent or public response, okay, so the school has to make a stance against bullying here. It's not acceptable in the classroom. It's not even in a charter school. It's not acceptable. And so I think that has to overshadow, the nits that we're picking, which are admittedly fun and attractive to talk about, especially on an atheist themed show like this. But I really feel I can't stress enough that bullying is a problem and that we need to take it seriously, even if we have suspicious, scenario situations. In a former life, I taught high school, and so I know how high school kids can get, and I could totally see something like this happening. If there was even among Christian students, even among other religious students, if one of them was waving their Bible in the cafeteria and preaching to other students, sure, yeah, they're definitely going to be a target for bullying. That doesn't mean that they should be bullied. It means that, we can understand why this person's getting bullied rather than somebody else. But again, my last thing to say would be, we have to stop bullying in school. I mean, that's really the main topic. And for me, that kind of colored my entire reading of the whole situation. Regardless of whether or not he was being aggressive, he needs to feel protected in school, and he needs to be noticeably protected in school. The fact that they're even having a discussion, was he being protected or was he not being protected? If the school doesn't have a paper trail a mile long of all the things they did to protect him, they're falling short there. They're being deficient in that. And so they have a responsibility to report, to perform that kind of service, to provide that kind of protection for their students. Malley, you're up next here. What do you got?
Wow. Well, you gave me a lot to think about there. I hadn't thought about that. And it's a really good point. Yeah, the school needs to come out and declare and follow through on saying, yeah, we do not tolerate bullying of anybody for any reason, and, no unlesses, no exceptions. Absolutely. I'm not sure 100% what needs to be done to protect somebody who is going out of their way to bother other people. I don't know what form that takes. You're the teacher. I'm not. Hopefully I will become a teacher when I'm all done with my schooling. But so far, no. What kind of measures are takeable in a scenario like this?
Well, I mean, they could at least investigate. Right? They would have to be able to show that they at least cared enough to look into it. They can, if the depending on if they could decide if Nicholas was provoking this type of response, then they could talk to that. They would have a record of that. We talked to the students. We found 30 people in the cafeteria that said he was egging them on, or he was calling out for persecution, or he was telling people that they were going to go to hell if they didn't, read the Bible or whatever. And so, I would imagine that the first step, at the very least, has to be, doing some kind of investigation, gathering information. And I'm not saying that they didn't do that, although I didn't see any mention of that in the article, and I was not able to find any kind of follow-up article as well. I know this was a little over a year ago that this happened, and so I don't know how fast the wheels of this type of thing turn in Florida, but I haven't seen any results. But yeah, at the very least, there has to be record that they've done something. I mean, it's do something before. If you can't figure out what to do, then just ask questions, talk to people, find out what happened, and then make a decision after that.
Chris, you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, sort of bouncing on the back of something that Malley said there. Sorry, something that you said. I find it. I understand where Scott's coming from, and you're absolutely correct. There should never be bullying in schools, but I have to wonder what part the persecution fetish sort of like had to take in this. I wonder what his parents were telling him. When he comes home with that, and it's very believable to me that the aggressiveness probably was built on over time. By I'm being yelled at about this. Okay, well then you just need to be louder about it. Jesus said to be loud about it. Jesus said to preach it to people. Jesus said that if you're gonna be persecuted, so if you're not, be loud, be bold.
It's for their own good,
right? And I almost wonder in this case if the school hasn't come out with a statement or anything like that, because it's all going to be aired out in the lawsuit. And if the evidence points the way that I think it probably does, it doesn't look good on a school just to come out and be like, we've got all this evidence. The kid was the one that did it all. Like this kid, you know what I mean? Because then they're just sort of victim blaming almost in the media. And so it's better for them if it all comes to a head in the lawsuit and they can present their evidence and the judge can look and say the school did what they were supposed to do, etc.
Yeah, I was like, it mentioned that, and Scott, you mentioned too the death threats, and the article does mention that he was actually investigated for death threats, and they found that they were unfounded. And I'm wondering, did they find that he didn't make those threats, or they did find that they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he made those threats when they said the allegations were unfounded? And I thought that was interesting that you brought it, that it was in the comments in the Christian site, so we're getting some kind of at least from a supposed eyewitness that we're getting the same story. So it's kind of interesting to me. I was wondering, do you think if this child had been a member of a different religion, he would be having these kind of problems? Does anybody think that would make a difference?
That depends if the rest of the story would remain the same.
Yeah, like if he had say he was from the Satanic Temple, do you think that he would still be? I think he'd probably be bullied more in that case. But my son actually let it be known to his friend once in the school cafeteria in high school that he was an atheist, and 3 of the kids jumped him and beat him up that day. So just because they overheard him. So yeah, it's a thing that happens.
I would say that a lot of this stuff is based off of behavior and not necessarily based off of the religion. Kids that age, their hormones are going, and they can get aggressive with each other. And sometimes it's just a matter of they have this aggression and they want to show off in front of their friends, or show off in front of somebody that they're trying to impress. And oh boy, here's somebody standing up preaching in the cafeteria. Perfect target, right? And so I would suspect that was part of it. It probably, if he was acting the same way, I don't think it mattered what came out of his mouth. I don't think it mattered that he was saying Jesus instead of Allah or Buddha or whatever. I think it was just the way he was doing it and what he was doing it and when he was doing it and the attitude he was holding while he was doing it. And again, we have limited information on this, so this is kind of a guess on my part. But my guess is that it wouldn't have that this isn't necessarily a question of religion, although the parents' response was very much based on their Christian religion. I think the actual incidents between the students is probably not. If it's related to religion at all, maybe that's just an excuse to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. This is a great segment. I really had fun with you guys on this one. Check out tiny.cc/ACA merch for some great ACA merchandise. And if you'd like to hear more from the nonprofits, just click right here.